Hey there. So I'm going to be going through your Learning Through Play investigative report. I'm going to be highlighting some strengths and then also letting you know areas that are in need of improvement. You're not expected to revise this report, but it is important that you understand things for your final paper and also just for future semesters. Rhetorical strategies that you might want to work on further, and also just so that you understand why you got the grade that you got. So, you're interested in learning through play. You'll remember that 4 points of your grade for this paper had to do with the clarity of your investigative question. So, um, according to what you've written here, your lead is Common Core was put into effect in the 2014-2015 academic school year. This initiative has increased the standards required for students in grades K through 12. While this might be a great intro to a regular research paper for an investigative report, this lead wasn't as connected to your actual report as it needs to be. So, in other words, you're not really interested in Common Core as this general thing, nor are you interested in the standards that have increased. You're really interested in how Common Core is maybe 95% related to a decrease in play in the classroom. If you're interested in play, it should be mentioned in your lead. That's really, really important. And then you have play has been proven to have positive effects on the development of children under the age of 7, yet with the, and then just misspelling of implementation of Common Core, there has been less time for play. So, and the reason why I'm putting it here is because I feel like this is kind of going towards the lead or the question that your whole paper is interested in, but I was a little bit confused overall. Because while this might seem like a lead or this might seem like the thing you're investigating, um, I was just unclear if this is something that actually holds true, because what you discover later on is it's not that Common Core gives less time for play as much as teachers are overwhelmed and so they feel like they have to do A, B, and C and they just can't find the time to plan play, right? Like I'm a little unclear on the overall stance of this sentence as it relates to some of the discoveries that you make later on, and the discoveries that we talked about during your conference with me is that it's not that Common Core can only exist if play isn't in the room, as much as Common Core makes it just really hard to find the time to um, plan out play. So just maybe even just clarifying there has been less time for play or there has been less time to plan for play would help. Okay, so then so hopefully that was clear. Overall, yes, your investigative question is clear. You're interested in learning through play, but what needs to be clarified is what about learning through play? So yeah, okay. Then there were 5 points given based on how you're using sources. In other words, are you using a wide variety of sources? And also, are you summarizing but also connecting sources together? So, for that, I wanted to bring you to your 2 interviews. You talk about Mrs. Caputo and then Mrs. Hirsch. Um, and so, while I did appreciate the fact that you're creating different sources or you're creating new sources and you're summarizing it in the same paragraph, um, I was unclear, and this is something that really you just need a discovery sentence. I was unclear of what these 2 interviews are actually showing you. Why do you have these 2 interviews? Why are you noting that Mrs. Caputo talks about wanting to focus on their socialization and problem solving skills rather than pushing them to the point where they hate school altogether? Like, what is all of this supposed to show me? I think what you're trying to say here by using these 2 interviews is teachers are not um, are not excited about Common Core replacing play. But I also think what you're showing here is that they too think that Common Core means that there's no opportunity for play, which I then think leads to a larger discovery that is there's a misunderstanding of Common Core maybe. Or not enough time given to teachers to understand how they can still have play and Common Core at the same time. So that's one thing that I want you to consider. Um, Making sure the discovery is clear, and it should really be clear at the beginning of each paragraph, and then the sources are really supporting that. And then just a transition note, you go from Miss Caputo, right? And you say, I think it'd be better if we read it. Mrs. Caputo has seen the effect this has had on her students firsthand. She does not have any play materials in her classroom and has found that her students have become bored after a while and begin to think of it as a punishment. A lot of it goes over their heads. In PS 153, where Mrs. Hirsch teaches, she noticed that since playtime has been cut so drastically, students are lacking the social skills and problem solving skills that they desperately need. We are seeing more and more behavior problems, and it should be behavioral problems, throughout the school. Okay, so what is the link between what Ms. Caputo is saying and Mrs. Hirsch is saying? You'll remember when we were talking about integrating sources, you can't just keep quotes or have quotes and not really clarify one, how they're related to your discovery. Now, the issue here is there is no discovery sentence, so that's probably why you didn't link it. But then also what am I supposed to take away from this quote? And how is it going to lead into what Mrs. Hirsch is saying? I think what Ms. Caputo is really talking about is how school seems like a punishment, and I think what Hirsch is saying is school really needs to be a place where they're developing skills for life. So how can we connect those two ideas, either in a sentence or a phrase, so that it doesn't seem like we're just putting these two interviews together because they're both interviews? Okay. So then we have, and this is something that I've been talking about since the beginning of this presentation, something that I really think is a really important discovery that you're making. You start with, instead, teachers need time to analyze the standards, practice different teaching strategies, learn from mentors, collaborate with colleagues, observe one another, look at student work together, reflect on why certain approaches work better than others, learn from mistakes, and continually improve. Supporters of the Common Core aren't against using play in the classroom. Rather, they think that the teachers lack the creativity to incorporate it into their classrooms. According to Pondisio, senior fellow at Fordham, if teachers are turning their kindergarten classrooms into joyless grinding mills, um, uh, and claiming they are forced to do so under Common Core, something has clearly gone wrong. Common Core demands no such thing. It's unclear who is really to blame for the misbalance of play and academics in a classroom, but clearly Common Core has an impact on the way teachers are able to conduct lessons. So, the discovery I feel like you're making is Common Core advocates don't see Common Core and play as one or the other. In fact, they're saying the whole point of Common Core is to allow for creativity, both for the teacher and for the student. That's a huge discovery, and I think it's a discovery that should have really started off the paper. And if you started off the paper with this discovery, perhaps what I think your real question is if we have Common Core advocates saying that play is allowed, then why do we have teachers saying play isn't allowed? So trying to really answer that question, why is it that there's this huge discrepancy? Now that's a question that I think you didn't get the opportunity to answer here because you discovered this so late. But I think it is worth asking yourself, given all the research you did, given all the information you have, why is it that teachers are convinced that learning through play isn't an option if there's Common Core? And I think it really has to do with teachers a bit like time. how much time they're allotted to do all of this planning, and also perception of Common Core. And there was, I think it was Ms. Caputo who said Common Core or testing has become sort of this punishment for students. So, like, really getting into how are teachers really viewing Common Core, and is that something that then leads to learning through play being X'd out? And so I think what happened is, as a reader, it feels like what happened is you made this really big discovery, or you realize there's this really big question that needs to be answered, and you say, well, we don't really have time to answer it, so instead we're just going to say it's unclear who really is to blame, um, and Common Core definitely has an impact, and that's too easy. And it's also not fair for an investigative report to say, oh, there's this huge thing that we need to investigate, but we're not going to do so. So you just want to be cautious of that. Um, and if you're saying to me, yeah, well, we didn't want to talk about this, well, then if you're not, and that's sort of what I mentioned here, if you don't want to talk about it because it is unclear, then don't talk about it in your report, especially so early on. Instead, what you should be doing is talking about things that you have resolved, things that you have discovered, instead of talking about things that have yet to be discovered. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. You write here, play, and I'll just go to the part that I bolded. The strict guidelines enforced by Common Core value standardized testing and an academic setting more than play. Okay, so just as a reader, this is, I think, the part that was very confusing for me. It seems like at certain points you're saying Common Core is the root of play being X'd out, but then there are other times where I feel like you're saying that's a misunderstanding of Common Core. And so then that really leads me to my overall question of, what do you think this piece is trying to investigate, or what is the angle? Are you interested in how Common Core prevents play? Are you interested in how play in general is better for children, right? Because that's what this paragraph is talking about. Are you interested in Common Core as a program that has so many failures, one of which is the way teachers have had to X out play? That needs to be clarified, because right now it feels like it's doing a little bit of all three, and that can't be so. Okay. And then, oh, so I think I went through all of the points, but so then there are also 5 points for developing new information, in other words, new discoveries. And so that's something that I've been talking about throughout, right? Making sure when you have these pieces of evidence, when you have these interviews, that you're clarifying what discovery you've made from these sources. So then, and this is really the final point I want to make, your conclusion sort of does the same thing that I noted here, or where did I note it? This sentence, it's unclear who is really to blame, where it just tries to be really general. And I understand that maybe your point was to be very objective, but there is a way in which you can be objective while still being very urgent, specific, and clear on what the discoveries are. So what I have here is, it seems like you're actively avoiding taking a position, but it seems like the rest of your paper wasn't doing that. So that's what becomes confusing. It seems like your entire paper is actively trying to show how Common Core, in some ways, has had an impact on the ability of children to play, while the reasons might be different, or while the reasons might, be in the teacher's camp and in the student's camp and in Common Core's camp. That's what you're actively trying to prove. So I really feel like a conclusion that says there needs to be more of a focus on what is going on to help a child in the future, not only academically, but socially, physically, and emotionally as well. Play has the ability to target all of these things. It feels like way too general for what we've been talking about. It's not that play has the ability to target all of these things. What your paper has really told us is there's a misconception of how play can be in the classroom with Common Core, and that Common Core does not eliminate play, but that teachers need to be more creative or get more time so that they can figure out a way to incorporate play into their classroom. So that's something that I just want you to understand, and that's a key part of an investigative report. Yes, maintaining objectivity, but making sure that you're specific and actively trying to find an answer so that it still seems urgent. If I feel like you're just trying to avoid getting an answer, then it doesn't really become an investigative report as much as a summary of the sources. And that's not what this kind of report should be doing. Okay, so then cohesion was 3 points, and that's something that you did especially well. In other words, making sure everything seems like it was written by one person and not 5 different people. So that was excellent, as was your APA style. You did come to see me, and we did talk about what you've discovered about learning through play, and we also planned for your presentation, so that was great. And then overall, strengths of this piece, a fine execution of APA both in text and your reference page and formatting, so that was fabulous and something that you should be extremely proud of, as APA is difficult. Your overall knowledge of the topic was especially strong, and I think probably is what led to some of the areas of improvement. Essentially, when you know so much about a topic, sometimes you want to tell everyone everything you learned, but in fact, it's important to figure out an angle or figure out, what specific question of this topic or underneath this topic do you want to really focus on. So again, I knew from the beginning to the end that learning through play was something that you know backwards and forwards, and that's great. But again, what needs work, while I mentioned before the overall organization is especially effective, the way in which or the presentation of the question needs work, and that sort of goes with organization. So while overall I like the way paragraphs lead into each other and mostly how you're combining sources, I feel like the question needs to be organized differently, or the question needs to be presented earlier on, so that it becomes clear that this is a very important topic that we need to talk about. And then, and I guess this kind of goes with the new information part of the rubric, you need to make sure your discoveries are clearer than they are right now. And I mean, writing is a process, and writing is also sort of like a domino game. So it makes sense that because your investigative question isn't clear, then some of your discoveries aren't clear either. So it's hard to say that one happened just because they're happening because of each other, which I totally understand. But I do want you to just maybe even for 5 minutes think to yourself, okay, if I had to do this over again, what question was I really interested in? And if that's the question I'm really interested in, then what were the discoveries that I had of that question? So if my question really is, why are teachers saying that there's no room for play? Then what were my discoveries? I discovered that teachers are really harping on the fact that they see testing as a punishment. I see teachers are really harping on the fact that they really truly believe in play. I see that Common Core advocates are saying that that they believe play is really important as well. So then what is the discovery that I'm making here? Maybe that there's a miscommunication between institutions and teachers about Common Core. Maybe it's clear to me that teachers don't have time, so they can't even think about trying to do both. And then one person that was kind of missing from this are the students. So I would be curious to see what the students think of play and Common Core being one and the same, or is there room to take a test and have some play? So that's something that you can consider. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment on this page, or you can speak to me once spring break is over. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your spring break, and I will see you Monday.